This is Queer from the Other Side.
Your queer approach to everything from the paranormal and supernatural realms.
With no subject left unexplored.
I'm Shana, your resident witch with a talent for hunting ghosts and connecting with Earth's energy.
I'm Alexander, your in-house skeptic with my own ghost stories and obsession with outer space. But will I ever believe?
And I'm Derek, your on-air spiritualist on a mission to awaken souls to ground their spiritual power into their physical experience, bridging heaven and earth.
Get ready to explore.
Here we go.
The show starts now.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Queer from the Other Side, your podcast jumping deep into the paranormal and supernatural worlds from our queer's perspective. Boo. Today, are you ready? I don't think I'm ready, by the way. It kept me up all night. We are talking exorcism, but from a point of view that is unique, gripping, and non-denominational, by the way, which I think is so important to note because we're not talking about demons and exorcists from the Bible, although sometimes it can get in that realm. This exorcism, it applies to energy, mental health, addiction, and connection with the afterlife. And we have Hollywood's leading exorcist, Rachel Stavis is here. I'm your driver today, Alexander Rodriguez. I'm your resident skeptic that I want to believe, but still, whatever. And I'm joined today by my co-hosts.
I'm Intuitive Shana. I'm your resident witch.
And I'm Derek Jameson, and I am your, what am I today? An alien unicorn. That's what I am today, an alien unicorn.
Either you're a dragon having sex with other ghosts or something.
Which also happened this week again, and I had to literally, yes, I know. I get action every week from non-physical things.
But that could be misinterpreted. But did you have sex with a ghost or a dragon?
See, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because
it was boo.
Boo.
So here's the thing. People stop me. You know, I go out in West Hollywood like every single night, and people stop me every single time, and they're like, what is with Derek having sex with ghosts? I can't even get to date number 2, and this MF over here is like, every week, pop, pop, pop.
I'm telling you, I literally had it happen this week, and I had to set a real strong boundary with that, and I was like,
you're like, no means no.
Absolutely not. But you know what the weirdest thing about it? Whatever, and I can't see it. I know I can feel it, but I can't actually see it in these experiences. And so I felt it knows what my trigger points are, though. It knows exactly what
turns you on.
Yes.
Get out.
I'm not
my ex-boyfriend couldn't even do that.
Because you were saying like that you can't see it. I was like, but what if it's an ugly ghost?
That's literally what I'm like. I don't know what it looks like. Love is blind.
Love is blind.
Dead love
and dead. Yeah, love is blind and dead. But before we welcome Rachel, I want to know, how has exorcism played a role in what you both do? Because what you both do, it's opposite sides of the same coin, I guess I would say.
I think that's a really good way to describe it. Do you want to start, though? I'm really interested in your experience with exorcism.
You know, sometimes when I'm working with a client or somebody one-on-one, even if it's just a tarot card reading or something, I find that if there's a really heavy session happening, I pick up on the energy that's with the person that they need to release, and that as we kind of tune them up and have more understanding and they ground themselves, that spirit will depart from their energy field, but it will begin to engage with me. And that's okay, because what they do is, in the meditation that I do after a session, they'll show me how they died, or they'll show me what the issue is. They'll show me why they have the emotional attachment, and then from there I can move them. So it's like it comes off of them, then I work with it one-on-one to move it into the light. So that's how I really have noticed that I work with it mostly.
That's really cool. Okay. My experience comes from a mixture of paranormal investigation. So it's not necessarily exorcism so much as it's like house cleansing, kind of the same, kind of different, depending on, I guess, the situation and who you're talking to. And also from dealing with clients that have had spirit attachments. I can do certain entity removals, certain cleansings myself. The issue that I personally run into, and this is a very generalized statement, so it doesn't apply to everyone, but I'll say like 80% of people secretly or unconsciously love their ghosts. They love their bullshit. It makes them interesting.
That's also part of the book. It's, like tricksters, that they trick you in, like it's a codependent relationship. And so we're going to talk all about that. We're going to talk about how Rachel's worked with mediums as well, and how it's like two separate things, but it comes together in a really beautiful way. Without further ado, I'm so fascinated. I have to tell you, I know that I'm the resident skeptic, but reading our guest book, here, Sister of Darkness, something immediately clicked in me in a very intense way. And whether or not I believe in everything, I instantly understood the concepts in the book, and I understood the energy, and it made amazing sense, so much so I was up all night just thinking about everything. And I reached out to the spirit this morning. So Rachel Stavis is a best-selling author, Sister of Darkness, like I said, the Chronicles of a Modern Exorcist. She's a filmmaker and a healer exorcist. She has removed energy blockages and has spiritually cleansed. She is non-denominational, by the way, not tied to any religion. More than 10,000 clients to date with a 100% success rate. We're going to talk about that. From rock icons to Oscar winners, from politicians to members of the royal family, from cult survivors to couples with infertility issues, young and old, extreme cases and mild ones. She's also worked on several film sets to help clear the negative energy, and she has even gone into people's houses to clear the space before they move in. And in some cases, she has gone into a client's home before they have returned from rehab to clear out negative energy and to create a safe space. Everything is energy, according to her. She's even worked on films behind the scenes, hired by the producers to clear negative energy from the set. You name it, she's been called in to do it. Even a slaughterhouse where there was captured cow souls, by the way. We're going to talk about that. And the Cecil. I know we're going to talk about the Cecil too.
I want to go there so bad.
I'm not so sure after reading this. Without further ado, please welcome the exorcist next door, Rachel Stavis.
Thank you.
It's so funny, like reading this book, it's like I feel like I know you. And then I expect like you're going to be like Elvira with like cats hanging around and like a skull in your hand, and you're just like, I'm Rachel.
I mean sometimes.
She has a skull on her neck and one on her finger, so you're not too far off.
Yeah, okay. But just to get our audience started off, you have been seeing entities since you were a little kid,
yes.
But you didn't really cultivate this into what you're doing now until like your 30s.
Yes. So I was born with the ability to see entities with my eyes. I see them almost as clearly as everybody. And when I was a kid, I would complain about monsters under the bed or monsters in the closet, and then parent would come in and be like, there's nothing there. And so for me, it just never went away. And I learned very quickly that if you talk about this, you're crazy. So, because as a kid, you don't know that other people don't see stuff.
Right.
That's just not, so I was like very blabby about it, I guess. And my mother was a very difficult woman. So she was like, you don't want to be weirder than you already are. And so I stopped talking about it. And I tried to push that site out, as much as possible. I would say I was pretty successful growing up, as a teenager, having all those issues and stuff too. I was like, that's as weird as I want to be. So I kept trying to push it out. The strongest things would always come through, which still to this day will still happen, even if I'm at like a concert and I try to tune it out or whatever. You can't tune out the worst of it. So it just always, everything pushy comes through. Let's just say that. So I became a writer. That's, my normal job. I moved back to LA. I'm from LA. I moved back to LA to pursue that. I was working on video games and comics and kind of transitioning into television and film. And so...
And kind of putting in these kind of scary stories that you've experienced into what you were doing.
Constantly. I'm still doing it because I think I started doing that. And I started, my appreciation for horror, I should say, in total, because I was looking for something to explain me.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't talk about it. So that was where I turned. So I would start, obviously watching horror movies or reading everything horror and going like, oh, okay, all right, that's sort of sound. But it was never the same thing. But, it kind of gives you a space to be in, a safe space to be in. And then started writing it because I was like, well, maybe I can share part of my world into the fiction work that I do, because I never thought I would tell anybody that this was going on. And I didn't for a very long time. I came here, I started writing, was doing okay, going through the motions of everything. And then when I don't remember exactly, I want to say it was like 30. I had a week.
You look 26, by the way.
Appreciate you.
Exorcism does a body good, I guess.
Yeah, it keeps you young. Spirit work keeps you young, people.
I would think just the opposite, like draining all your energy.
No, it's because in my case, this is a weird thing to say, like tangentially, but I bring high beings into my body a lot, and that's why. I think that's honestly why. Because I have to for my work. Yeah.
Who needs Botox? Fuck it.
Just raise your frequency.
Exactly. No, so I had one of those weeks where it was just so many stressors at once, and then I had a fender bender. Wasn't life-altering or anything like you hear where someone's like having this deep like shamanic work or whatever it was. It was literally a fender bender, and I could not suppress my sight anymore. So now I was seeing entity everywhere. And, you know, I always say like it started sort of with like the person who's screaming on the corner at nothing. I could now see what they were screaming at and couldn't push it out. Worse, couldn't push it out. And so at that point, you know, I always joke about this too. I'm like, at that point, I sat down with a scotch and was like, okay, y'all up there, whoever gave this to me, like either I'm checking myself in or you're going to tell me what to do here. And obviously we went the other direction. So, and now when you said over 10,000 cases, yeah, it's over 10,000 cases, which is insane to me. It blows my mind. But yeah, here we are 10,000 cases later.
And have you been like traditionally trained in what you've done, or has this all been like obtained through a state of gnosis?
It's connecting to spirit. So I didn't want to pick up anything from anywhere else. I wanted it to be authentic, and anyone who knows me or follows me or whatever knows that I'm authenticity above everything else. So, you know, I was never in it for like any fame or fortune or notoriety or any of that. In fact, I stayed away from that for a really long time.
You did. It was like the secret. You didn't. It was
I
all
didn't
word
tell
of
anybody.
mouth. Yep.
No, I mean, I was married and didn't tell this person.
Well, you didn't tell them a lot. Let's be honest.
Well,
wink, wink.
I mean, who knows what they know? But anyway, you know, yeah, I wanted everything to be as clean as possible, and I felt personally like this is who gave this to me, so this is how I do this. And at first, of course, it was very messy. You know, when you're first starting out, and I as you said, I was word of mouth, very quiet Hollywood for a very, I mean, up until maybe last year, quite honestly, or this year even, because I was the opposite of looking for those things and going public. So, yeah, I would first start working on like a friend who I'd seen something with and said, okay, like now I'm going to tell you this weird thing, and also can I do this? And a few people would trust me to do it, and then they would have a good experience, go on and tell someone else. And so that's kind of how it started happening. But in the beginning, you know, Spirit would give me all the information of how to get, you know, an entity out of someone's body.
I was going to say, there's no instruction manual.
No.
How did you know what to do with your hands? What did you know how to say? How did you know how to, like, lay the person down? And, like, how did you know?
Literally just Spirit. And obviously doing it. I mean, that... You know, my early ones were fun because, like, my early ones, like, they, thank God they worked, you know, but...
Imagine that entity, like, come on, girl.
I probably had a few, honestly, where they were like, this is going to be nothing. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I learned a lot, obviously, as I go, too. And still, to this day, I mean, I don't know everything. Like, I still learn things all the time or come across an entity that's not something I've seen before, which is rare now, but still does happen. But, yeah, it was crazy because, like, I'd do the exorcism correctly, but, like, I would set up candles in a specific way, and then no one told me not to put them on the floor. And so I would kick them over while I was doing stuff, and then there'd be a fire I'd have to put out while I'm trying to work on someone. Or like someone has to throw up. It doesn't happen all the time. There's a specific type of entity that happens with that. And, you know, when it does happen, and I was like, oh, I have nowhere for you to do that. So it was just like little weird things that had nothing to do with taking demons out, but like everything to do with how to set up a spirit room properly or how to perform something properly without causing like chaos.
Yeah. I kind of want to set the framework for our listeners. You say spirit, and you talk about it in the book. This is how you're non-denominational, but you're connected to a higher being. And from what I gather from your thought is it's not any religion, but it's all of them at the same time.
Yes.
Can you talk about spirit and how spirit plays a role in anchoring all of our religions, everything that you do, all of these entities, us as people, the higher beings, all of that? It's all anchored with spirit.
No big deal. Yeah, so my catch-all word is spirit or source. Sometimes I interchange them, but that's everything. All the big leagues, right? All the things that we call, you know, spirit guides, ascended masters, high beings, etc., God, even, however you think about it. That is all spirit for me. And so obviously in different religions, we have different kind of high beings, right? Different things like Christ and so on and so forth, without getting too religious. But, everybody has a thing, right?
That's a part of it. Angels are a big part of everything.
Exactly. So people don't like to hear this, which is a big part of the book. But high beings work together. So it doesn't matter what religion you are, and it doesn't matter what religion, let's say, worships what high being, because you can even go down, like I also work with like pagan high beings, and they all work together, and everybody hates that. When they're like super like religious, they don't like to hear that at all, but that's the truth. That's how it works. And so, in the beginning, or even still sometimes, but I'll have like a client who will say, I grew up in this specific, high being culture, whatever that is, let's say Christianity. And so my family was like super religious and super this way or super that way. So can I request like Christ to come in? And I'm like, I can't request it, but like, that's not the only person who's going to come in and work on you. Like all of these other high beings that you've never even heard of, probably that you were taught to dislike or, think were not real, will also be helping you today. So it all just it's a team effort.
Do you find that there's resistance, or does that like maybe slow down the effectiveness of what you do because people are kind of resistant to grasping onto a certain religious ideology?
I want to say that most people, at least nowadays, when they come to me, they know what they're going to get. Like, this is it. You're coming to me and you're getting it all. But I think there are times when, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, there are times when something will slow down the process, and that could be a number of things, but the biggest part of that event is someone is addicted to their sadness, addicted to their trauma, or thinks that this makes them special. And in those cases, you can pull so at this point in my work, I don't allow anything to stay. So I always pull something out. So if you come to me and you're like, I have this thing, I need it gone, something I recognize and can do, I do it. But then that's where it stops. So when people leave, right, however they decide to live their lives moving forward is up to them. And that used to bother me so much. Really. Like I can't tell you how many, oh God, I'm going to out myself here in a big way, but how many rock icons I've worked on that believe they have a very specific entity that helps them, right? They're like, I don't want it. It screws up my life. My life is, fucked up, and I'm on every drug imaginable and, totally addicted to everything, like sex addict, and like nothing's working out. But I'm super fucking good at this. And that's what this thing gives me. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell them it's not, first of all, that's not what it is. And second of all, we need to get that out. Like, that actually is not helping you. You're helping you. It's your talent that's helping you. Let's get this out. And sometimes, over the years, they've let me do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm giving them all the tools now to like stay clean, stay high frequency, like just do the homework, because I'm always like a big homework giver. So I'm like, do the homework, get yourself right, like stay clean. And they go out and they like 6 months later, they'll be like, hey, so I don't think I feel right. And I'm like, oh man.
Well, and you tell your clients for like 3 days after, you drink plenty of water, you get your rest, you don't drink, you don't eat meat, like you remain that way because it's like you have an open sore that's just on the verge of healing, and it's like a magnet for new entities to just come and attack.
Yeah, it's like you've just had surgery, so you have to be mindful of that. You can't just like go run a marathon today, And again, like the aftercare is different for everybody. Sometimes it's, don't do this or don't do that. Sometimes it's something totally different. Like if I'm working on someone who's already very connected to spirit, it might be something different, or, a cult survivor or other things. Everybody's a little different. But yeah, like you have to be cool for a few days before you go back out into the world,
And I love what you do because you say if somebody doesn't believe what you're doing or they don't believe in the process, you still get that entity out because it's between you and the entity getting that out, whether somebody or not believes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, I can't tell you how many shows I've been on where they're like, I don't believe this. Or I'll get like so many comments where I don't believe this. And I'm like, I don't care. I mean, like, I'm not a church. I'm not trying to convert you. It's okay. Okay. Again, sorry, tangent, but we're working on my second book now. And we're going to have announcements on that soon. But my second book, I guess I'm announcing it here. My second book is all of my, not all, but a few of my most difficult, most challenging, weirdest cases, my unpublished case files. And I've been keeping those for a long time. I probably have about 100 to 150 of those that I just keep for myself. But we're going to take them out to people to where you get to read them. And I've already told everyone, I'm like, nobody's going to believe this because it's easier for people not to. So I don't find that offensive. I understand that you don't want to believe this is real. Like, I understand that you want to you don't want to think about the plane you were on or the cruise ship you were on or, you know, this hotel that you stayed at. I get it. So I don't find it offensive. I completely understand. It's just not, it doesn't stop my work, but also it's not the life I live. You know?
Yeah.
I don't get that luxury of just going,
Do you find, like, with what you do, you're really putting yourself on the front lines of a lot of scary stuff.
Sure.
Like a lot of scary stuff. And I believe that when you immerse yourself into any kind of world, if you start thinking about entities and exorcisms enough, you bring them forward. You know, you bring something like that there because you're stepping through that door. So even like reading like your book, like, you know, be careful of what you're focusing on and like trying to bring forward.
That was me last night. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I just read that other book and then like weird stuff started moving on my dining room table. Like, it happens. So with what you do, like, you're really putting yourself out there as like, you know, going head to head with some of these forces. Has that increase like the psychic protection and the wards and things that you have to do for yourself to keep yourself like spiritually clean and feeling safe?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I feel like personally, I've just done this so many lifetimes at this point that it's like, come and get me, you know? Like, I mean, seriously, like, what are you going to do now? You know? But that being said, I get a lot of visitations, and I just had one literally 2 weeks. I was on vacation 2 weeks ago and literally had one on a cruise ship. And I do let my guard down when I'm on vacation because I'm like, this is fine. And then
Ghosts can't swim.
It's like the worst. But yeah, like I do make sure that I cleanse myself and my home quite often. Obviously, my spirit room. Obviously, you know, when I go to places or people or sets or whatever, I have to be very cautious because, you know, especially like with sets because, you know, listen, we make horror movies and we make horror movies where we're like, this is a cool true story and we're going to go back to this space and shoot here and it should be fine. And it's like very rarely fine. So, you know, making sure that other people are safe, making sure that the space is safe for people to do whatever reenactments or things they're going to do. And for me, I think my most challenging cases are usually spaces, just because entity in spaces is usually a more malevolent entity than with people. Not always, but there are two types essentially that take spaces. One of them can also take people, but it's like a very special person that takes. So when you do spaces, an entity could literally pull the entire space down on you. So you have to be very careful in spaces. You have to have a lot of protection. I don't take people with me quite often because of that, because I don't want to be responsible for them too. So, you know, and also like I have like tattoos that are specifically for me, like protection tattoos, which I've talked about a little bit before, that I had to get because I was wearing protective things that would keep just disappearing or being pulled off in the middle of the night, especially with visitations. So, you know, I shouldn't say there's nothing that ever scares me because that's not true. But I will say that nobody needs a frightened exorcist. And so, you know, I keep my vibration high when I enter the space. I don't leave until it's done. And once it's done, I can have my, you know, nervous breakdown if that's what I need to have. But it doesn't happen during.
What is your go-to cleanser? Like you said that you cleanse like your home and your office space and things like that regularly. I know a lot of people, their go-to is straight to like sage and Palo Santo, both of which are now controversial. But that aside, what are some of your go-tos? Because I personally feel like sometimes we overuse things that aren't always effective with the big boys that you play with either.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few in the book, just simple ones. I tend to use... I don't know if I should say this because I don't want people to do this, but I tend to use a lot of things that are considered a little more toxic.
Like sulfur?
Sulfur.
That's one of them,
yeah. Let's see. Wolfsbane. I tend to use things like, I mean, that's not toxic really, but like lotus, like blue lotus, like stuff like that. But easy ones that are like go-tos are like what I call kitchen witchin', which are just like, clove and aniseed or star anise, and then I add things like copal and frankincense and, a lot of resins. High frequency resins are really, really good. And if you really don't have that, if you're like, well, I just don't, really simple things that you can get are like angel incense sticks, because usually those are high frequency things like rose and like Damascus really, and cinnamon and things that will work in a pinch.
This is kind of funny, but I just like, what is your view on asafoetida? And do you work with asafoetida at all?
Can you define asafoetida first? Girl, you got to find asafoetida.
Asafoetida, it's a spice. I don't know how to explain it. A lot of people use it in exorcisms. I work at an apothecary, and we specialize. We're an occult store. We have an apothecary. We have all of the things that you have listed. My least favorite thing about when people are preparing for exorcisms and come in is when they ask us for asafoetida, because it smells like
it's very bad.
No ass that has ever walked this planet. It's terrible. To the point that like when I've had to use it myself, I'm like, do I have to? And I hate it so much. Like I really try not to. So I'm just like, do you play with asafoetida?
I mean, it's fine. It is an item that would work in a mix, but it's also something you don't need.
Yeah.
So it's like again, like for me, it's all energy. So even choosing what things I use at the time is about what energy they're giving off. Oftentimes, what makes sense, to be honest, if you look at what the church burns, they burn it on purpose. It's not just because it smells a certain way. Oftentimes, it doesn't smell so good. Those things are actually high-frequency resins. And so when you burn high-frequency resins, it pushes out a lot of lower vibration.
How do you know, like, what's your immediate indicator that when you meet somebody or you're around somebody that there is an entity with them? Is it by sight, or is there certain indicators with people that you come across that you're like, there is an entity that is kind of around them or working through them or with them? What's that?
I mean, for me, it's literally I can see it.
Yeah.
So, like I've had clients, I had a family once come to me who had a child who was like, this child is having all these problems. We'd been to the church. They had, went down their checklist and they were like, she's faking this. And of course, for me, it was like, nope, that's an entity. Come in, let's do this. So it's always sight. But I would say for other people too, like if you can't see it, if you are feeling a certain way around someone, it's probably something. If you can tell who is walking around very angry, very like nothing ever makes them happy, no matter how much they get, no matter, whatever their life is, does not matter. They're just in a space all the time, or they're just really nasty. That's oftentimes entity. But entity can also, as we talked about, cause infertility. It can cause addiction issues. It can
suicidal thoughts.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It can do all of that. So I would be like, I hate to say this, but like, I don't know now. I haven't done the numbers, but like 80-something% of everyone walking around has entity.
Or has had one at some point in their life.
For sure. So I wouldn't not be friends with someone because they have entities.
Sure.
But if they're like the kind of entities that you're like, who, that person, then protect yourself.
And it's even almost like a blanket. It's like we say that there's a haunted house or there's like a tragic sight center, like Gettysburg. How Adam Barry was talking about Gettysburg. She explains it all. Can you just talk about the different entities and how you've classified them?
Sure.
Because I think it's fascinating what we think is like a haunted house or like a serial killer. Their thought process, it's all explained by different hierarchy of entities.
Sure. So when I say entity, because that's a blanket word again for me, when I speak of entities, I'm talking about what people perceive as demons. I'm not talking about deceased people. Deceased people and attachment are not really my thing. I defer to mediums for deceased people for most things. Deceased people I find more annoying. Like they annoy people more than they attach. They're not really feeding off people most of the time. Doesn't mean they're not annoying and they're not around. Or if someone was, shitty in life, they're not necessarily not shitty in death. So, it takes a minute before all that changes over. So, so I'm talking about demons, really. And there are a few that I see constantly. These are the most common, I would say, around. The first one being like the least malevolent, the smallest on the chart would be Clives. They look like, I don't know, like face hugger brain type things to me. And they're the ones who amplify everything. So, if you're, sad, you're depressed. If you're angry, you have rage. It's that kind of thing. I always call them like the alley kitties because they just puff up. Like everyone who comes in is like, I'm so overwhelmed, and it's like the littlest thing, but that's what most people walking around have. And those you can actually pick up and let go of without ever really knowing you had one, because it doesn't take much, because they're like leeches in a way. So if you work on yourself even slightly, you could knock that out without it. Take a minute, but you could. And then we go up to, oh my gosh, wraiths. Wraiths are the ones that cause night terrors and sleep paralysis. Wraiths are usually attached to sexual dysfunction of some sort, being exposed to something too young, just all kinds of that kind of centered stuff, unfortunately. And unfortunately, they are very common. But they do cause a lot of stress for people and relationships as well. They can bring a lot of toxicity into relationships. They're just like very messy. And you can also, it used to be more rare, but I'm seeing it more often now, where you can have a lineage wraith, usually on the mother's side. That's how it usually comes down.
This is fascinating to me, and it kind of goes with the Akashic records, how you bring things from
For
past.
sure. Yeah, it's not as common as just picking it up, but it can happen. And also, if you are a sensitive, I would call it like a high to severe empath, you might notice one on someone you're with. So that's why I'm like, be careful with your sexual energy. Be careful. Because if you're lowering yourself.
Sleeps with ghosts.
I know. I'm like, get off me.
But like, if you know you're a person who's lowering your vibration for people, that's where trauma happens. And then we go to tricksters, and tricksters are exactly that. They reveal themselves. Those are the ones who are like symbiotic. They'll reveal themselves to their host. They'll come in usually when they're children, not always, as imaginary friends or even deceased loved ones. Like they'll look like whatever you want them to be. Speaking of, like my rock stars, that's what they had. And there are two different types of tricksters in total also, which I don't know if the book covers, but I can't remember. But there are tricksters and there are ancient tricksters.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ancient tricksters, worse. Worse. Been around longer. Know a few more things. And ancient tricksters are usually visitations. Those are the ones that you'll see in visitation if you're a person who gets visitations. And then we go up to collectors, and collectors are spaces only. So collectors will go to a place of mass trauma, usually a place with high foot traffic. So hotels, like luxury places, like things where a lot of people go through. And they will hold souls of the deceased that refuse to move.
This freaks me out.
Yeah, so they'll use the deceased as batteries to scare the living. And that is very frequent in haunted spaces. Like if there are haunted spaces with a big history. So there's usually a collector in there somewhere. And most, ghost hunters are not necessarily trained to know that. But they're just looking for the ghosts, and the ghosts are making all the noise and doing all the things, but there's something controlling that.
And these are all non-human, right? Non-human. Because I've heard a lot of stories. I've experienced spaces that have things similar to this. But the way that the collector has always been presented is just as an older ghost or a more, and I'm like, but why is this ghost more powerful than this one? Like if they're all human,
right?
So,
exactly.
Okay.
And the difference between I always say deceased people like they don't shut up. So deceased people want to be found constantly because they constantly have stuff to say. And I've always said I'd be the worst ghost. Like no one should ever have me on their ghost hunting show because I'd just walk in and be like, "Here's a ghost." What do you want to know? But anyway, so yes, it's true because like collectors and entities in general prefer not to be noticed. They don't want to be found. That's the difference. They're not showy. I know movies make it very showy, and on occasion, once they're found, they'll be showy. But they'd really rather you don't know they're there. They work best with unconsciousness, with people who are like, that's not real. I don't care, whatever, and just keep going. They can live in that for a very long time. The more, conscious and aware you are of energy, the less likely you're going to not notice something feels off, so that's where they don't like to be. So same with spaces. They would rather you be like us ghosts so they can live another day, and keep doing the things they're doing. So collectors, that's what they do. And then my big bads are realm walkers, and that's what most people consider the devil, I assume. There's more than one realm walker on the planet. It's not very common. They can have people or spaces. They can affect people, like if they hold a space, they can affect people miles and miles and miles away. They can affect, I don't know how many people at once, but many, many people at once. They can do everything the others can do and more.
Wow. And you felt these kind of more malevolent energy in like serial killers and dictators and things like that. And
yes.
Because you can actually see entities in pictures too.
Yes, and it's very distracting in movies.
I can imagine.
Wow.
Because you see the actor and you see
Yes.
that's...
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah, so...
Your reality experience is so much different than ours.
I know,
Wow.
it's a something. I'm watching a movie and it's like a Christmas movie and I'm like in the space and I'm like,
is this Krampus? No.
Right, exactly. And then there's like, here's, I will not say names, but here's this particular actor whose the entity is like in every shot.
Oh.
And it's actually okay when I'm watching horror films because I'm like, okay, I can get into it. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. He's just hanging out. But like when it's like a rom-com or some shit, it's like...
It would be better if the Wraith was also wearing a Santa hat.
Yes, like they don't dress up and I don't appreciate it.
What scares me about the collector entity is because it does trap the soul. So these poor people cannot move on unless the area has been exorcised, which freaks me out. Like you went to like a film set, or it was a TV set, and it used to be a slaughterhouse, but also the mafia was there, and so you experienced even the souls of the cows, even seeing the hooves and all of that, and then you experienced the souls of all these mafia people. I mean, that terrifies me that somebody is kept at that level by something that even a medium could be able to talk to those souls, but not solve the actual problem.
I should clarify, though, that a collector really can't keep them there.
Okay.
What a collector does is they go to places where there was a lot of death, right? And most often murder, okay? And what happens in those spaces is usually there is someone responsible or feeling responsible in the space. And if that's the case, those are the people who don't usually want to move on. It's more, they've kind of trapped themselves in a way and kind of just accepted it. And so when I do a space like that, what I have to do, and again, I don't consider myself a medium. Excuse me, I can talk to deceased people and I do so sometimes, but it's not like if I went into a space and I was like, I'm going to do this entity, you medium do this deceased people, that would be fine. That'd be great with me. But often I don't get that luxury. So going into a space with a collector when there's deceased people, what I have to do is I have to talk to the deceased people first. I have to let them know that it's okay to move on, even if they were shits, even if whatever, because oftentimes they've been there so long, it's like, all right, you've done some work here. Got it, you know? And once I can get them out, there's no battery, there's no armor for that, no protection for that entity anymore. So now I can get to the entity.
Well, how do you see the spirit that you're talking about, the soul that you're discussing? How do you think, or from your experience, do they see their experience?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I feel like from the conversations I've had in those spaces, I'll just go from what they tell me. You know, from the conversations I've had in those spaces, they don't feel good enough to leave. They feel like this is what they should have.
They deserve that
yes.
thing,
Yeah. And so, you know, you have to do a lot of work. A little ghost therapy.
Ghost therapy.
Is there anything that you could recommend for people at home that feel like they can feel like their house is haunted, or they feel like they've had a loved one pass away and they feel the presence and feel like, I don't know if they have passed on? Is there anything from your experience that the civilians can kind of do to help people go on?
You know, I think the best thing everyone can do, like I wish everyone would do it, is open up their ability. Because everyone comes in, there are a few like source given rights to people when they come in. And that is the ability to speak to your spirit guides, the ability to speak to deceased loved ones, and the ability to speak to spirit as a whole. And like a lot of people don't believe that because, you know, just in this world, we don't believe in these things. So if you notice when children come in, they're always singing. They're always talking to people who aren't there. They're always like, oh, I made a friend over here and over here and over here. It's because they know how to raise their frequency very easily. It's a right. Like, we know how to do that. But then as we get older, we're taught to, you know, forget about this stuff. What I want people to do is open up their abilities again, because oftentimes grief is so terrible for people that it can really make you like change, you know, like you could be like, I lost this person, or I lost whatever, someone close to me, and now I'm hard now. And I'm bitter, and I don't want, like, I hate everyone. I hate everything, you know? It's so sad to me, because if they just did a few simple things to start practicing that opening up, if they did that, they would find that that person is there. You know, and when we talk about most deceased people, not those in these kinds of spaces, most deceased people, they're not stuck anywhere. They go back and forth. You can call on them. They also have their own things to do, but they will be there if you want them to, you know? So if you're like, hey, I really want to open up my abilities. I really want to try this. I really want to hear from you. They listen to that. So it's all about just going, okay, I'm ready. I'm open. Let's go. And like a couple of little tips and tricks.
And I know that you're not a medium, but you talk in the book how our departed ones and even ancestors that we've never met, even great-great-grandmothers that we've never met, they sometimes appear and help you with the exorcism process.
Especially for people who, it mostly happens when the person who is there, whatever caused this attachment, might have been their fault or connected to them in some way. So in other words, if they've gone through a lot of trauma and that trauma put them in low frequency, and then here came this thing and they've not really dealt with this trauma, and let's say that trauma was a relationship with a parent, that parent is deceased, that parent will show up because they're like, okay, I feel responsible for this. I'm going to do this. Or great grandparents, or especially adopted people. When I have people who are adopted, so much of their family comes in. So much because of that, you know, initial abandonment and all kinds of things. So, or they're just checking on them, or just want to be there, or, you know, want to reveal themselves in some way, all of that.
That's how I saw, you know, I do music. And when I was a teenager, I was playing the piano in my house with my family still lives there in San Jose. And that was my first awareness that there was and it froze me because I was sitting there writing and just playing. And all of a sudden I felt this energy rush me really quick from the back. and I saw this picture of a Native American woman's face, like really close. But it's this knowing that that's an ancestor, and I literally froze. And it was the first conscious time that I had a connection seeing an ancestor like that. And it has always stuck with me, like in that realm. I see so many different things and have experiences with different types of beings. But that was the first time I know that I experienced like an ancestor that was someone from a tribe from far back. And this was them coming around for the first time in this way. So that's such a cool reflection to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. And it does happen for people. And, obviously we're in a world where any kind of weird thing that happens to people, unless they're like in this kind of space or like into this, they're like, that's not real. That's not real. But it is. And it happens all the time. Like you do get visitations from loved ones, and you do get visitations from not so loved ones. And you also get visitations from entities if you're sensitive enough to feel it. Or, even people who are like, I'm not sensitive at all, but I walked into a space one day. I was like, no, I did not like that space.
You mentioned like a concert, and yes. I often, if I'm at a show, even like a dance show or a house DJ show or whatever, there's been times I've closed my eyes, and the moment I close my eyes, I can see a bunch of darker entities that are attached to people, and they're all sitting there with them in the field. Mm-hmm. It is one of the wildest experiences I've had, and they were all looking at me though. Like they knew I could see them. And so I closed my eyes, everything kind of turned red except for them. And the closest ones is what I could see most effectively. So there was a person standing right here, and there was a girl all black and her hair was down, and she had a black drink. And she was looking at me, and she was grinning and sipping her drink. And and they were all looking at me though, because they knew I could see them. And I said, you can let them go now. Let them have fun. Like, let your person that you're attached to, I was like, they want to dance. They want to be free. They want to let go. They're here to be free and not feel pain. And so I had this conversation with as many entities could hear me in that way. And I was like, please let them go. Like, let them have fun. But they were all looking at me, and I had no fear around it because I wasn't afraid that they were going to attach to me. It's not mine to hold.
Of course.
But I loved that I had the experience of being able to communicate with them to get them maybe to understand a little bit more, even if that's not the time to do it. But it's really powerful when you can see that. And it doesn't happen for me often where I see an entity with somebody, but it has happened.
I don't know why that story makes me smile and kind of laugh. Like, that was my first response was to laugh at that. Like, it was funny.
Well, she was like, bitch. And I was like, you go.
But you also talk about it. You see things the way that you think, like you talk about Jesus, like how you saw Jesus as a kid is different than you see him now because the image now is formed by pictures that we've seen and all that. And it's like how an entity knows that you'll respond to, which I think is fascinating. It's almost a chameleon. What you see is going to be different what you see, even though you're seeing the same entity.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I'm at the point now where I most of the time see them how they look. It's not as pretty as they present. But when I have clients that come in, especially with tricksters, which are the ones that they perceive, they're like, it looks just like this. And I'm like, okay. And it's very funny. I've had a few clients come in who were like, hey, I have this, I don't know, let's just make this story up. I have an angel attached to me, but my life is a shit show. Okay, well, that's not an angel. That's something else. And then we'll take it out, and they'll go back out into life, and then they'll come in, and they'll go, the same angel came back, and I'm like, this is legitimately a different entity.
Because once you vanquish an entity, so to speak, that entity is gone. It's not like
I don't
it can
peace,
go
love,
into
and light.
somebody else.
I don't peace, love, and light. That was one thing I did learn when I started. At first, I was like very gentle about healings, and I was like, oh, I guess I should like transmute everything into love and whatever. And so I would take it out, but not. I don't know how you would call this. I would let the energy flow out. I wouldn't do anything with it. And then I would see people come back with the same damn thing. And so I was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. I see how you guys are. I see what you're going to do. You're just going to give me like 4,000 times the work. So we're not doing that. So yeah, now I dissipate the energy. So the energy's gone. It cannot form again. And that's with the high beings. We just kind of snuff it out, if you will. But yeah, so now I know for sure, when they come in and they're like, it's the same angel. I'm like, this is just what it's pulling from your mind.
But do you run into people that attract more? Because, as we've touched on in the show already, like some people, they like their stuff. They're addicted to it, whether they know it or not. So they go out into the world, they repeat the same behavior that got them into this mess in the first place, and they come back. Do they own that, or do you have people that get mad at you and they're like, no, you didn't do your job?
I mean,
I want a refund.
Yeah. Do you experience that?
I'll say more often than not, they're like, oh, I fucked up. But
They know what they've done.
But you have a few who are the ones who are like, oh God, I shouldn't even say this, but I'm going to say this. We're just putting it all out there. You have a few who are like, my entity is the biggest entity. It's the best entity. It's the entity you don't even understand. This one, I don't know. I don't know about you. I don't know if it's going to work. Meanwhile, I'm like, okay. So then I see them and it's not a big entity. But we can take it out. But this is a person who doesn't really want it out. This is a person who wants to be correct. Do you know what I mean? They want to be special. They want to be the one that, you can't fix. And it's not about, I mean, I wish people didn't think this made them special, because it doesn't. Like, this is very common. But then on top of that, it's like, it's making your life worse. Don't keep it. It doesn't make you happy. It's not worth it. Like, to spite me is not worth it. Like, you're not spiting me, honestly. I'm going to go on and do other things. You're still going to have this entity. Like, do you want it out or don't you? But there are people who are like, oh yeah, she totally couldn't do it. I went to the best and she couldn't get it out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you are powerful.
But this is what I love about your book and the way that you look at everything. It's take the supernatural and the paranormal out of it. You're talking about developing better habits for life. You talk about a whole section about how to raise your frequencies, and it's good mental health. It's all daily meditation. It's all stuff. Take it out of the religion. Take it out of the Hollywood, everything. And it's just how to lead a better life and be more aware of those energies. And that's what I really responded to. It's like, you don't need to believe in everything, but everything you say can better your life. But you have to be responsible for attracting your own.
That's it. I mean, you really can make your life exactly what you want it to be, but you have to do the work to do that. It's not a quick fix. Like, even with entity removal, some people come to me and they're like, just take it out, whatever, and I'm just going to do nothing. I'm not going to listen to what I have to do. I'm not going to fix my problems. I know what I'm doing. I do it this way, and this is how it's going to be. And it's like, well, but doing it your way got you here. So why not try? If it doesn't matter, why not try it my way and see if it changes anything? But you'll have some people who just won't do that. So, I think overall, when we're talking about energy, even if you're not talking about entity or attachment or any of this, if you're just like, I believe in energy, but I'm not whatever, we have control over energy in a lot of ways. We are really powerful, actually, truly, we are. So whatever we kind of bring into the world, we do manifest a lot of things, both good and bad, right? It's like our focus is, where the energy flows, right? Mm-hmm. So I think people should just remain more conscious, kinder, better people in general, to start bringing that manifestation into fruition for yourself, because you're bringing constant things into the physical. It's what you make of that, right? So if your focus is, I'm an asshole and I'm going to be a selfish asshole everywhere I go, well, then that's what you're bringing in for yourself. And no matter how much money or fame or fortune you get, because I see obviously a lot of celebrities, you will be unsatisfied forever, and you will be miserable and angry. Or you could be someone who is not any of those things, who has like a happy job that's an obscure thing in a small town, and be the happiest person on earth, because you are constantly manifesting exactly what you want for yourself, and you're kind and generous and loving and good, and people love you, and that's great. So it really is just about changing your energy.
And just, I'm going to give my final thoughts and your final thoughts as well. You talk about an election at the time that you wrote this, and it's so weird because that was the 2016 election, and what you wrote is exactly what's happening right now. You know how we feel this negative energy sweeping across the nation? People are being meaner to each other. We're having hate speech. We're having hate crimes. We're fighting our neighbor because they're believing in a certain way. This all comes from lower frequency energy, and it all comes from the top, which is very dangerous. This is how we see other dictators, and this is where the language kind of starts. But it's an entity that feeds in the lower frequency of everybody, and that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah. So when I was writing this book, this was like years before it even came out, that was a very big energy movement that I was seeing. So like, I should explain this. So I have a side effect of the work that I do, which is that I'm very sensitive to energy fluctuations. So like now on like my socials, I'll sometimes give people the heads up, like, hey, this next 2 weeks is like really good for this, or this next 2 weeks go hide, because it's going to be really bad for this. So I'm really sensitive to when energy shifts and changes. And it started then, and now we're seeing, in this past year, I've called it the year of the goddess because it's about people stepping into their power. And so we're now seeing that shift as well, with joy coming back and peace coming back and harmony coming back and caring for people coming back. And I'm really excited about that.
I love that you just brought good news and good energy to wrap this up. Like, thank you. I think everyone needs a little bit more of that. So that's wonderful. I have had such a wonderful time listening to just your insight and your stories. And I just want to say, as someone that isn't in the field of what you do per se, but something kind of adjacent, I love the attitude that you're bringing to this. I do, because you're very confident, but you're also no nonsense about it. And I feel like that can be something really challenging, especially when you have people that don't want to take responsibility or don't want to release things. It gets really challenging. And I just feel like probably because you've been doing it for a while. This isn't like your first time, probably not your first lifetime doing it, but you're just like, it's just no nonsense. And I really admire that. I love that. I can't wait to read your book.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we got to be grounded about these things. I certainly don't look like your everyday exorcist.
Well, define what an everyday exorcist.
I think a priest, mostly.
What's funny, because that's what Hollywood. What I love, also you point in your book, is every religion has a ritual for exorcism.
Of course.
No matter what. And the Vatican did their official one in the 1600s, and then you wrote, they updated it in 1999, which, why what was happening? And
some stuff.
Yeah. But for them to redo it, okay, this is our new handbook, there has to have been some stuff going on.
I do have one quick question. What is your opinion on the Dybbuk box? Are you familiar with the story of the Dybbuk box and all of that? How do you feel about that?
It's really hard to trap an entity in a thing. I can't say it's impossible. It's not impossible. And in fact, I've talked about this on podcasts before with Ross Hernandez, actually. We were talking about this because I was like, there's not a lot of trapping an entity in an item. Even with our most studious of scholars, it's really hard to do because they're an energy that can come out of an item. But I will say I have seen an uptick in items in the last couple of years as well. And I have a couple of those items from case files that I've had where they're like, take this thing. Julius, which is this doll that I have in my spirit room, which I post a lot because people just love him. I don't know.
There's just something about haunted dolls.
We found him a girlfriend.
We'll have to set up a play date.
Yeah.
She has Stephanie, who's definitely.
Oh.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, he's messy, this one. But yeah, so it does happen. You can do it if you can have something essentially in a space, but for how long, I don't know. I mean, I have what I do with my items. So I have a couple of items that I keep just for research purposes for myself. Because again, I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I'm learning as I go as well, still to this day. But I keep them on diminished capacity. So it kind of means I don't know how you'd say this, have them at the knees, they can only go so far out of the object at this point. They can't go in and out of the object they do, because that's really what entities do. They move in. They're looking for people to feed off of, so they'll move in and out.
It's just like their little anchor for the time being.
Exactly.
It's temporary.
Exactly. So now Julius can only go a certain amount of feet outside of himself, and then back in.
Jesus, we need a whole other episode. Yeah. Do you have a final question?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for honoring your authenticity and doing this again in this lifetime. You obviously have very high priestess energy from
thank you.
many lifetimes. It's like
Appreciate.
I can like feel it and see all the like dimensions of it. And I just want to say, it's always a choice to come in and do this again to help. And I just really respect and honor that you have chosen that in this lifetime.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody, go get Sister of Darkness. I ordered off Amazon the day before, and they delivered it in a day, and then I read it in 2 hours. So good. And there's some Hollywood business happening with your life story too. That's on the horizon.
Yes. So a couple of things. We are working on Sister of Darkness, the television series, right now.
Awesome.
A scripted show, which hopefully I can tell you more about in the next literal month. We've been doing that for a bit. Glenn Mazzara is show running, so I'm really excited because he's my bud, and we always create cool things together. And so that is happening right now. We are talking to a few people for film for the unpublished case files, so that could be very cool. We'll see what happens with that. And then the second book is on its way.
Oh my God, I can't wait. Where can people find and follow you?
I'm on Instagram and TikTok. I don't know what I'm doing on TikTok, but I try. It's weird. I don't know. I'm not a child. I don't know. But I'm at rhstavis.com, or rhstavis, sorry, and rhstavis.com.
Awesome. And Derek, where can people find and follow you?
At Derek Jameson on Instagram and all the things.
You can find me at Intuitive Shana on Instagram, and I too am floundering my way through TikTok.
Listen, I do what I do. I don't know if people like it or they don't. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Grindr. No, just kidding. You can find me on Instagram at Alexander is on air. And as we wrap up, please take a moment to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, Queer from the Other Side, and on X, Queer the Other Side. Also, you can join our community, ask us questions, chat with each other, make blog posts. Our Other Siders is what our fans are. On our website, queerfromtheotherside.com, and send us your questions and comments there or email us. And until next time, stay paranormally.
Boo, bitch. Bye. That was another episode of Queer from the Other Side.
Please like, share, review, and subscribe.
Until next time, stay curious.